My childhood wasn't happy. I was sent away to boarding school at 6, where I sought refuge in a love of nature. I collected insects and preferred solitary pursuits. I grew up when I went to Cambridge and discovered how to have fun and make friends. By the time I was 30, I'd met and fallen in love with my life partner, Derek.
We were fortunate to have fallen in love at a young age and found the perfect partner in each other. We've been together for over 30 years, living mostly in our house in London.
But you know, there is quite a sort of fear about the whole thing in a way.
Those are going to be chopped finer, please.
What is this, the bird?
The idea for our journey came to Jeremy one morning as he was listening to BBC Radio 4.
I heard someone say that spring travels north through the British Isles at the pace of a walking man. How wonderful, I thought, to follow spring north by boat. Our coastline is magnificent, and so much of it seldom seen from the sea. Because Thomas Cook's voyage at that time would have been a topic of conversation, as indeed would a lot of the voyages of exploration.
Cook's Track, this is the same one here.
Yeah, well,
Another of Jeremy's ambitions was to visit St Kilda, a group of remote, mystical islands way out into the Atlantic.
St Kilda has long exercised a place in my imagination. It was the home of the last group of hunter-gatherers until well into the 20th century.
This would be our ultimate destination. The journey was a year in the planning, and by April 2008, we were ready at last to leave. With cases piled high, we set off for Paddington to catch the Cornish Riviera Express. One of the things that has always struck us is how quickly that wonderful feeling that is the initial excitement of spring passes.
It's that feeling, that evanescent high that I want to capture. That wonderful and intense excitement at the burgeoning of new life.
While we waited for Killarney to arrive, we stayed with our friend, the artist Rose Cecil, and Dolly, our goddaughter.
What's your favourite thing about Cornwall?
Dolphins.
What don't you like about it?
Seagulls, they take your food.
Sometimes when I go to London, I'm aware of what an angry place it is.
Right.
They're frustrated, and I think it's also
Too much concrete, perhaps, yeah.
Too many people, and those people putting too much stress on their environment and on each other. My work for quite a few years now has been mainly about the human relationship with nature. And it became completely clear to me that quite soon we will be the only animals left on this earth.
Isn't it all about the ever-increasing population? The fact that the economic system only can provide for growth. There is no way that we can get into equilibrium with the economic system that we have, which has provided wonderful benefits for us, for mankind generally. But the Earth can't go on growing and growing and growing inexorably and using more and more resources.
Or poisoning it the way we are.
I hardly slept last night, I was so excited. It was Tuesday the 15th of April, day one of our journey. We rose to find Killarney anchored in the bay, the beautiful yacht that was to be our home for the next 2 months.
Dimmy, the first mate, came in the tender to pick us up from the little harbour and to take us out to Killarney.
It's an amazing privilege to make a trip like this, in a boat like this, with such a wonderful crew to look after us and to shepherd us safely on our journey.
This is our dependable Captain Tim.
No, we dropped the anchor. We're not using mooring. I tend not to use moorings.
Also, first mate Dimmy.
England!
A deliciously mad Bulgarian. And when he's not cage fighting, our chef Ren.
Now I'll show you how to do.
Lastly, Rowan, our young steward from New Zealand.
Seafood.
And of course, the star of the show, our beloved Kalani, a boat we know so well. She's a real classic, a fully displacement, twin-screw, steel hull, diesel motor yacht built in 1971. We could barely contain our excitement watching the crew raise the anchor for our departure.
We'll all be together for the next 2 months, and who knows what adventures await us. Today's Wednesday the 15th of April, and we're just leaving Basel on a beautiful, sunny day as you can see, heading for the Scilly Isles.
Our entry is pretty straightforward. There is deep water all the way. It's well buoyed. It's clear day. It's lovely weather. It's not a problem. So I'll come down south. I'll go due west where standard collision rates apply.
Why is it sort of so tropical at Sunderland?
Well, it lies right in the Gulf Stream in the southwest approaches.
How far off the mainland are we?
About 25 miles.
Yeah, 27
The
miles.
whole of the Scilly's area is about 45 square miles.
Right.
Hundreds of islands with thousands of rocks.
It's peppered. You really don't want to be messing around with it. That's why, as I said to you, I wanted to make it in daylight and in fair weather. You get, inevitably, you're always going to swell around here because you're out in the Atlantic and there isn't enough landmass.
I couldn't wait to start photographing and painting. That's my passion. Capturing images of the journey, breathtaking seascapes and coastal scenery. We are nature, and to be with nature like this was going to be a profound experience.
Once out to sea, we set course for Scilly, past the treacherous Wolf Rock Lighthouse. It's not long before the low outline of the islands becomes visible on the horizon.
On arrival at St Mary's in the Scillies, we managed to secure a mooring buoy, and eager to explore, we jumped into the tender and headed off to visit one of the outer islands.
It was here that I first experienced the heady rush of excitement of spring, the warmth of the still weak sunshine, the first spring flowers, and the chorus of birdsong overhead. I love the tranquility and peace of this timeless place. It's pretty windy most of the time, but we've got it on a perfect day.
How incredible to have this view.
Isn't it lovely?
May we ask, how long have you been here on St Martin's?
I've been here 53 years. I was born in Essex and grew up in Lancashire.
And then came here 50
And came
odd
here
years.
on holiday.
Are they indigenous plants, or where were they?
They're rather rare, but I first saw it in Tresco. Every time we went there, we'd stroke it, you know.
Oh, well, we must go and have a stroke.
Yeah.
It does feel like silk. What do you call it?
Silver tree.
Silver tree. It's fantastic.
The gardens we're going to visit on Tresco are world renowned, but are still the private property of the Dorian Smith family. Augustus Smith settled here in 1840 and quickly realised that the barren islands could be made to flourish simply by planting windbreaks. Within their shelter he was able to grow exotic plants from the warm temperate regions of the world: the Mediterranean, South Africa, Mexico and South America. The warm Gulf Stream ensures that the islands remain frost-free even during the depths of winter.
The garden at Tresco comes as a complete surprise. You get off the little ferry and walk for about a mile across windswept moorland, then through a line of trees and into a subtropical paradise.
Could you tell us a bit about global warming and whether you've had any effect of that in this garden?
What you do notice is that some of the plants are flowering at slightly different times of the year. Yeah, geranium madurense, yeah. Yeah, Madeira and drainage. All the flower growth is only in a couple of months, but everything else is a couple of years old. These are very much more toxic than the normal euphorbia.
Right.
You put some of the sap on your skin, within 20 minutes it burns through the skin.
The mass of what you see are hummocks of pinks, which is also known as thrift, sea pink or thrift, and it comes out in flower in the mainland in late May. Here it's coming out in late April.
This whole carpet, it's sort of spongy, everything's so spongy, and it makes you feel sort of weightless.
There are no trees on the barren island, only distant vistas of rocks and sea. The ancients who built this stone burial chamber knew just where to site such an important monument to their dead.
Come on, you said there's nothing.
Right, £10 then, £10.
I'll do you 20.
You're not planning with that girly shit.
So just 23-year-old man, you know, he need to prove himself. You see what crazy stuff he has to do.
See how tough we are.
Right, the weather I've got through here on the Navtex, we're between Plymouth, Sea Areas and Lundy. The sea is rough to very rough at the moment. So you need at least 7 meters to get over, which is a spring range on this. Now, I know how much we all wanted to go and have a look at Lundy. Depending on the weather, the conditions, etc., we might get an evening anchored there.
After 4 days of waiting to leave, we were getting frustrated. Outside the shelter of the islands, the sea was still rough and stormy. Then came a lucky break in the weather, and we slipped anchor late that night. How was the passage?
We had a bit of a northerly swell, so we were banging into it for a couple of 3 hours.
Basically, you were heading, in a straight course?
Due north for about 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then I altered course to 045 en route to Lundy Island. There's Scilly's, there's Land's End, and we came up here, and then we went north.
What is the distance from Scilly to Lundy?
It's 96 nautical miles.
96, so approximately the length of passage is
10 hours.
Spectacular, isn't it? Just empty, and then this great lump of rock in the middle of the Bristol Channel.
Lundy is a curious lump of rock, beset by some of the strongest tides in the world. Once a private fiefdom, in the 19th century it was owned by a Reverend Heaven, who built the substantial Gothic church. The early lighthouse was built in 1819 at a cost of £36,000, a fortune back then. The island is now run by the Landmark Trust and is an important nature reserve, both on land and under the sea.
Strong winds at sea were forecast, which made us take shelter in Milford Haven in South Wales, one of the finest natural harbours in the world. No sooner had we anchored than we saw a sinister-looking police boat approaching.
Well, we're doing the check under the Terrorism Act. So basically any vessel coming in from a port outside this port, so it doesn't have to be outside the country.
You've got your oil refineries here.
Yes.
As a crew member, it's a pretty easy way to get into the country, isn't it?
Yes. The height of the Iran-Iraq war, there was an Iraqi vessel in here which the two Pakistani nationals on board jumped ship whilst they were in here.
At Milford Haven, we were joined by 3 guests, including our friend Michael Waterhouse, a published ornithologist and birdsong expert who was writing a biography of Lord Grey, the Liberal Foreign Secretary before the First World War, and also an ornithologist and author. We left the boat and took a walk through spring meadows and woodland filled with flowers and birdsong.
Yeah, Jeremy, that's a sycamore.
Oh no. No, that's a chestnut.
No, this one.
That's
It's a very, very fluty sound. And Gray had 5 birds that he absolutely adored their song. One was the nightingale, one the blackbird, the blackcap was the next, and then the curlew and the eider duck, believe it or not. But blackcap is a warbler, comes from Africa. The male has a black head, the female a brown head. And Gray says the blackcap, like the gypsy in front of the castle gate, sang very completely.
Yeah, it's not destroyed the tree. Look at that. Derek, a present for your birthday.
Thank you, Jeremy. How lovely.
Perfect cherry blossom.
Priceless present, thank you, my darling.
It was priceless. We're looking across a field of rape in flower at a destroyed Norman castle, Carew Castle, or as the locals call it, Carew Castle. And you can see from the castle architecture that it was originally a Norman castle, but has been much altered in Tudor times to provide nicer accommodation for whichever family lived in it.
On board, the subject turned to global warming, with Michael taking the side of the skeptics.
What we're in at the moment is an interstadial period, in between an ice age, right? And it gets a lot warmer and colder. I go down to the people at Shalfleet Quay and I say, 40 years ago, were the really high spring tides any higher than they are today? And they say no.
But you know, this is where you begin to get a tremendous conflict between those who are mad keen to protect the Earth's environment. Climate change has happened before. It's not the first time, you know, the planet's climate has changed. It's really a very good thing that people have decided that they can do something about it. You know, before people would say, oh well, that's God's profit. And now you've got all these people saying, well, actually, you know, we can play our part.
Now that man has developed this extraordinary technology and has become so populous throughout the world, we are clearly influencing the way the planet moves.
Yeah.
And so we can't deny responsibility and just say it's him up there.
Jeremy, Rene just caught a big shark. Dogfish.
I really wanted to catch our own lobsters and crabs, so I put down pots at every opportunity. I quickly found that it's not as easy as it looks. No lobster and no edible crabs.
And there's a huge gallantry out of there. We're going to see some fascinating, truly marine birds. Gannets are extraordinary birds that spend 10 months of the year way out at sea. They dive from a huge height.
Like a dart into the water.
Absolutely like a dart. And they have an enormous bill on them. And they come down and they take big fish. So they have this incredibly strong skull to be able to cope with game and some sort of protective membrane over their eyes.
Today we're going up to where? To Theli.
Forecast is coming out of the southwest.
Little did we know that today would be the first day of 6 weeks of perfect sunny and calm weather, the best May in northern Britain in living memory.
To our delight, 2 bottlenose dolphins escorted us into Abersock Bay. We anchored off the long sandy beach, with the twin St Tudwell's Islands to seaward. We're off the eastern side of Ynys Enlli, or Bardsey Island, which is just off the Llyn Peninsula in North Wales, and it's an area of special scientific interest and a nature reserve. It's famous as a nesting place for Manx shearwaters, who nest in rabbit burrows and fly in at night with their rather ghostly calls. Bardsey is a holy island, infused with the spirit of the medieval hermits and anchorites that chose to live there in quiet contemplation. In our walk across the island, we came across the spring squill, a rare bulb in full flower, and some shelduck, bright in their breeding plumage. Those are shelduck there, and they are our largest British duck. And they nest out in rabbit burrows, like the Manx shearwater. They're very beautiful, and in the breeding season, which is now, they have a lovely chestnut collar or chest band, which is very prominent, and a very prominent red beak. The Manx shearwater, which everyone tells me nests down rabbit holes, but I don't see any rabbits.
There are no rabbits. Rabbits became extinct in 1986. The exact reason for their demise is unknown. August to January, the population just plummeted. There's not been a record since. We've been told by the Countryside Council for Wales that we cannot reintroduce them.
Because it is a natural extinction.
If it was a natural extinction.
Oh, that's interesting. How could it not have been a natural extinction?
I don't believe that Mixie would have wiped out the rabbit population.
So who would have done it?
I've no idea, and I don't know how, because I don't see how you could remove 2,500 rabbits from the island in 4 months.
So this is a case for Inspector Morse?
Or someone.
You have a theory?
I don't believe that.
I think you've got one, but you're not telling us. I think you've got one. You know where to point the finger.
It's an impossible question to answer.
We're leaving Abersock Bay and we're making a passage of about 55 miles up to Holyhead.
We certainly are.
Which is progressing north in our quest to chase spring. Well, that was exciting. The 3 bottlenose dolphins that have been chasers out of the bay are probably the same pod that escorted us into the bay. So there's absolutely no sign of the mackerel yet. That, to me, is one of the real harbingers of spring, is the arrival of the spring mackerel. And the shoals of spring mackerel bring taupe and thresher sharks. And in Scotland, one might even hope to see some killer whales.
Captain Tim heard a distress call over the radio and, as maritime law dictates, altered course to go to their assistance.
No, we're to the east of Middle Mouse, Conway side of Middle Mouse. Over. Yes, we can see you there. Are you in the possibility of colliding with the island? Over. At the moment, we're fairly static. The wind's holding us off, but we've absolutely no steerage. We don't know why the steerage has gone.
I can see him there.
We're about half a mile away, I would think, from the island. Over.
Are you carrying canvas? Over.
No, we're not carrying any canvas. We're only towing. Over.
Right, I have a visual on you. You're bare pole to the east of Mouse Island. Is that correct? Over.
That's correct. Over.
Are you in any danger of drifting onto the island? Over.
Not at the moment. Over and out.
Yeah, well, there's been a mayday out. Vessel's lost its steering, so there's quite a few vessels going to its assistance in the hope that we can help. We can see what's happening.
Yes, everything's in control. Thank you very much. Over and out.
You're welcome. Guys standing by 16. Right, let's get heading back to where we're going.
We continued east to the north end of Menai Straits. I wanted to visit Puffin Island, home to a large nesting colony of guillemots. But that's a fantastic colony of guillemots there, and they do look exactly like penguins. They come from the same ecological niche, which is basically underwater fishing for small fish and squid. And they fly underwater, as do penguins. But the big difference being that here in the northern hemisphere, where there are no penguins, guillemots need to fly through the air as well because they're land predators and they have to nest on cliffs. Well, this is quite a sight. This is Beaumaris Castle, one of Edward I's defensive ring of castles that he built along the Menai Straits, particularly to keep the rebellious Welsh in check. And in its day, it was one of the foremost examples of defensive military architecture, with two very massive rings, so that anyone who penetrated over the moat and through the first defensive ring was caught in a trap and could be demolished from the inner defensive ring like animals caged. And there's quite a lot of it left, but some of the top of the castle was either never finished or removed, which is sad. Otherwise, it's in really very good state of repair. I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, here we are all dressed up for winter. I've got a sweatshirt on, we're carrying waterproofs, and suddenly, coming down the Menai Strait, we hit a blast of warm air, and the temperature must have gone up by 7 or 8 degrees in a nanosecond. And here is everyone in t-shirts, and it's summer. Where's spring gone? We've got to get on to Scotland and find it again.
From Beaumaris Castle, we went in the tender down the narrow Menai Straits, where the tides run fast and dangerous, to visit Telford's famous suspension bridge.
When did Telford build this bridge?
Telford's bridge was the first true suspension bridge in the world, built in 1826, before the age of steam for carriage traffic, one of the great engineering marvels of the Industrial Revolution.
After the excitements of our day exploring the Menai Straits, we headed back to Holyhead to refuel and to continue our journey north across the Irish Sea.
We are approaching the Isle of Man, which is the isle where I grew up, and I haven't been back there since. We're flying the rainbow flag, which is the gay flag, and of course the Isle of Man, along with the Channel Islands, was the last place in Western Europe to decriminalise homosexuality. In fact, they were forced to do so by the British government, so I wonder whether attitudes have changed along with the law. Being back in the Isle of Man brought back some of the happier memories of my childhood. Days spent on sandy beaches, picnics in the hills, and the intense excitement of the TT motorbike races.
And what about the mackerel?
They're here.
They've been here all year.
They've been here all year, yeah.
So tell me about what you do.
Retired.
Yeah, but what did you do before you retired?
What didn't you do?
What didn't I do? Let me see.
Coast
I was
Guard,
a sailor,
lighthouse keeper.
soldier, a lighthouse keeper.
Well, tell us about the lighthouse keeper. That sounds interesting. Which lighthouse were you a keeper at?
Where you're going, in Scotland.
Which island is that?
It's a rock.
It's a rock. Yeah, but
rock.
Whereabouts? I mean, try and
Off Mull.
Off Mull.
Yeah.
Okay.
About 40 mile out in the Atlantic.
And what was it like living on a lighthouse?
Grim.
I bet it was. Did you witness a dramatic storm or anything?
Many.
I remember as a child getting up to watch the TT races and the smell of burning oil to this day. And one day one guy came off right outside our house and had an accident, and he was taken into the house in his leathers. There was I as a little child, thinking, oh, this is all very dramatic and rather
glamorous. Going boing, boing, boing.
I think that's my phone. I bet it was. I understand that there were two issues on which the Isle of Man was lent on, I think would be a polite word, but perhaps even forced by the British government to change their legislation. One, I believe, was on the subject of birching, which was very dear to the island's heart, and the other was on the issue of the decriminalisation of homosexuality. And on what basis did the British government lean on the Isle of Man government?
I think I'm right in saying that there is a reserve power that the British government has to legislate for the Isle of Man, so it may even have threatened to do that, to legislate for us. But in the end, it was by means of Manx legislation, I think, that the law in those two areas was changed.
Our friend Simon Parks, a Manxman born and bred, kindly offered to drive us around the island to visit places Jeremy remembered from his childhood.
Do you think these could be elms?
I think they almost certainly are elms, but the problem is that it's so long since one's seen an elm in England, you've rather forgotten what they looked like. The wildflowers we see in bloom are typical flowers of the forest floor: wood avens, celandine, and of course bluebells. There are also carpets of wild garlic with its rancid scent. This is a beautiful, tranquil glen called Glen William, and it's a complete contrast to all the wonderful things we've seen from the sea, where we see all the trees coming into leaf and all the woodland flowers on the floor of the forest and the sound of the water, and it's a perfect spring day. And we're standing by a beech tree which is just coming into leaf. Bright green shoots just appearing out of the buds. And in a few days' time it'll be in full leaf. Well, Lord Grey talked about Beech Sunday, which was the day when the new beech was just coming into leaf. And that was a sacred time for him. And it is the high point of spring. And it's a wonderful sight. It's a truly magical place. Here at the Ayers Reserve, we can hear the sound of the grasses waving in the breeze and skylarks singing overhead. Well, this is a typical sand dune habitat. Acres of marram grass stabilising the dune system, looking like almost a snowfield might, of one thing. And in the wind, when it all moves together, it should look absolutely wonderful. And the wind has sort of moved it around, rather like someone putting their fingers through someone's hair. And we're hearing skylarks, but again, I can't see them. It must be close too. looking at the Chicken Rock Lighthouse, and at the background is the Calf of Man, the little island off the southern tip of the Isle of Man. And we're now being pushed round by the current and licking along at 12.5 knots.
Next stop, Northern Ireland and Strangford Lough.
It is a misty day, and we enter the narrow channel with caution, a strong inflowing tide, pushing us at nearly 6 knots towards the loch.
And then, in just a few seconds, disaster loomed.
Right. So have we been through the narrowest neck?
No, over here is the narrowest neck.
What's that boat there?
It looks like a crane barge.
Yeah.
The yellow vessel approaching the channel area.
What does he want us to do?
Use your radio! Use your radio!
Tim helmed us about with all his might using the powerful torque of Killarney's twin cat engines to put us into a tight turn against the 6-knot current. We went about with inches to spare, just managing to avert catastrophe.
We were close, and that is just not funny.
Too close to the comfort.
Yeah. The barge has 8 high-tension wires coming out of it.
Right.
And you're almost within inches of losing your boat there.
Yes.
I would have thought it just should be buoyed very clearly with the starboard hand or port hand buoy.
It was buoyed.
What happened? The buoy was just taken away at the time.
The first buoy got cut against the wires, then 12 oars. The second buoy got just pulled away. And I didn't know what he was doing. I thought I was going to follow him this way. I was reducing my sea area from that barge.
Yeah, they gave very bad instructions.
And left so late. And I lost a lot of sea room for that. Thank God we didn't try coming here yesterday.
Relieved to be in one piece, we anchored in a peaceful cove within sight of Castle Ward.
This looks to me like a lodge gate to Castle Ward. I think we're probably entering the estate now. And that would probably be a gardener or gamekeeper's house, but beautifully kept garden. We're looking at Castle Ward, which is a beautiful 18th century house with a classical facade on one side and, strangely enough, a Strawberry Hill Gothic facade on the other. The two owners, Lord and Lady Banger, couldn't agree on the style in which to build it, so they split the difference.
Well, I'm really concerned because everywhere I look, and it's not just the southwest, which I thought it was, ivy is taking over. It is just taking over all the trees randomly. And it's not just saplings, it seems to be totally random. It will take all the big beautiful oaks, the beech, whatever.
So the ivy actually kills the trees?
It will eventually kill the trees.
And you're right,
yes,
it's everywhere here.
It's everywhere.
And what do you put that down to?
I think it's because we've had such mild winters. You know, the ivy just isn't being controlled as it usually has. I can't think of any other reason.
It's a very interesting observation. The fields are bright green with new grass and full of frisky young lambs. It's like a scene from an 18th century pastoral romance. Well, this piece of rock here, part of a glacial outfall probably, and has been scoured by a glacier and rounded and smooth, and it's left these very obvious striations in the rock, probably caused by pebbles in the glacier. So it's like a giant piece of sandpaper has gone over this rock, and that was done in the last glaciation.
How long ago?
25,000 years ago.
Righty-ho. Well, the plan is, obviously we'll leave here on the low water slack, and we'll cruise up round back into Belfast Lough to Bangor.
We headed north for Glenarm Castle, the home of Lord and Lady Dunluce. They have restored the castle and gardens and started a salmon farming venture in the bay. But as we were soon to learn, disaster struck in a most unexpected way.
The thing that happened in November was completely unprecedented, when 10 square miles of jellyfish came up from the Mediterranean, somehow got onto the Gulf Stream, headed up the west coast of Ireland, and were headed towards the west coast of Scotland. And then there was a very strong northerly gale that blew for a number of days,
Right.
and blew them straight onto the north coast here.
Right.
We lost 250,000 salmon.
We then headed north to Rathlin Island and into a beautiful sunset.
And why is Rathlin so good for diving?
Rathlin's very good for diving because it's at the entrance really to the Irish Sea, coming in from the Atlantic. So we get very strong currents, and that provides very good nutrients in the water for both marine life and bird life as well above.
Eider ducks in breeding plumage swim close to the shore, posing for the camera.
And also a lot of wrecks around the coast because during World War I and World War II, German U-boats sunk quite a few ships here. For example, we're going out now to dive the Drake, which is a World War I British battle cruiser, which was torpedoed in 1914.
From the tiny port, an ancient bus took us 4 miles across the island to the RSPB Observatory.
Our first sight of the soaring cliffs and the cacophony of birdsong makes me conscious of why we embarked on this adventure. We're on the west tip of Rathlin Island on a beautiful day, and we're looking at a stack made of basalt rock, which is a hard volcanic rock, and on it are nesting thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of seabirds. The place is alive with them, mostly guillemots, but also razorbills, shag, fulmar, kittiwake. The warden tells us there's a great skua around, which would be wonderful to see. There are also ravens nesting here and a pair of choughs.
Unfortunately, this crab has to die before I start boiling it, otherwise it shoots its legs. So what I'm going to do is get the knife. I just got off the rib and I spotted a fisherman.
Yeah.
And he gave them to us for next to nothing, £20.
That's amazing. I mean, I've never seen a crab that size in London. Down the hatches, boys. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It was rough when we started our crossing, but soon became calm when we were in the lee of the headland.
After 3 or 4 hours crossing from Ireland, we finally reached Scotland, and we're just coming into the very sheltered harbour at Campbelltown in the Mull of Kintyre. Those are the finest fresh Scottish langoustine. Simply amazing, and we've been given £500-600 worth, if not more, for free. They're delicious raw. When they're completely fresh, a squeeze of lemon juice.
Next morning, we landed on the Isle of Arran to look for some ancient henge monuments.
This is beautiful stand of sea campion next to what is commonly known as eggs and bacon because of the little red colour of the flower before it opens and the yellow colour when it's open. And that's a type of vetch or member of the pea family. And what's interesting about these foreshore plants is that they grow in lines depending on how salt tolerant they are. "2 miles inland and we're at the stone circles on Macri Moor. The people of the Bronze Age position their sacred monuments in dramatic scenery that still afford stupendous vistas of an unspoilt countryside. Henges date from the early Bronze Age over 5,000 years ago. We know little about why they were built, but can safely assume they served some ritual or sacred purpose. The immense labour expended on their construction tells us the importance they held to the people back then.
What a pleasure it was to visit these ancient henges and to have them all to ourselves, not another soul in sight. Just like the ancient communities of yesteryear, Buddhists have chosen to establish a monastery on Holy Island. This remote place has been sacred since time immemorial. We docked at Troon, excited about collecting the ribbed Soho Jims, which had been trailed up from southern England to meet us.
Where is the bloody thing anyhow?
There it is.
There it is.
Fantastic. There's a bit of boy racer in all of us. And we just love, putting that throttle handle lever forward and seeing her leap into action.
Far out to sea, the lonely, uninhabited granite rock Ailsa Craig stands tall. It's 1,100 metres high and home to a fifth of the nesting gannets in Scotland. It's also the place where the stones for the sport of curling were traditionally quarried.
We've just had our first close encounter with puffins, those most engaging little clowns. Well, we're here in Rothesay on the island of Bute. This is a great Victorian holiday resort for the people of Glasgow, because it went through a terrible, terrible period when Glasgow was in decline in the mid-20th century.
Victorian times it wasn't ladylike to go to a loo, hence why they had the flowing gown and the cage and open crutch knickers, and they stood at a drainage system.
You're kidding.
You're
and
not.
done
You're
wee-wees.
You're kidding.
Richard Attenborough,
Yes.
Kenneth Griffiths, Billy Connolly, Prince Charles. I can actually show you. There is black.
Was this one you were watching?
Yes.
You were watching?
Yes. That was the 28th September 1998.
Oh, I feel like a prince.
I'm dying to ask you a very rude question about Prince Charles. Dare I ask it to you? You know what it is, don't you?
Oh, you go.
And is it? No. Where are we going today? Up Lock 5. We're here on Bute at the moment. Of Crinan Canal starts here, and that, believe it or not, that little distance there takes six hours because you've got about 15 locks, which all have to be operated by hand.
I might be able to turn the boat, but I won't, if I go off course this way, I'm going to end up on this bank.
Our friend Rob Common came to join the expedition as our rib captain. We had arranged to meet him at the pretty lakeside town of Inverary on Loch Fyne.
Come aboard. Captain Rob.
Sailed for the Royal Navy, raced with them, coached their teams, became a racing coach, got into powerboats.
So it's been pretty much full on with the sea for quite a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, people really forget the power of it. And she's a very odd mistress, the sea. The moment she lulls you into a full sense of security, she can then dump on you from a very high height.
Sadly, the canal is too narrow for Killarney to pass through. We'll go through on the rib, while she'll have to go the long way round Kintyre, a journey of more than 100 sea miles.
See ya. The Crinan Canal is a fine example of early 19th century engineering. Its 15 locks taking boats across the narrow neck of Kintyre, thus saving them a day's sea passage.
We've just come through lock number 2 on the Crinan Canal with the help of that nice young man who showed us how to do it.
And Lady of the Lock.
And the Lady of the Lock is waiting for us at gate number 3.
Did she say something about the captain? What did she say?
Captain.
She said, God, your captain's hot.
We passed a rusting Clyde puffer, boats that used to pass through the canal en route for the most remote outer islands.
We're in high spirits. It's a gorgeous day, sunny but cool, perfect for cruising the canal in an open boat.
Yeah, well, our challenge is that it is 15:24, right? And the last one closes at 5 o'clock, and this guy says it takes 2 hours to go up, 1 hour up and 1 hour down. But the only thing we're going to do is like speed the fuck out of here, really, between each lock.
Thank you.
We got 13 of these goddamn things. I mean, it's like a nightmare.
Oh, I'm afraid I think there's little chance we're going to make it.
Good afternoon.
Hey Jeremy, they're going to send people over to open the 2 sea locks that are remaining. Of course it's going to charge a fortune, but it's like, what can we do? Okay.
Wide vistas open up as we pass through the canal. The views shimmer in the low spring light and form a picture of pastoral perfection. Just extraordinary. And a light on the reeds, the marshes, and the different greens of the hills in the distance, and the mountain absolutely framed perfectly. The only thing so far I feel really frustrated about is that we haven't had a decent catch of mackerel. That'll mean spring has arrived to me.
Mackerel running in Norway, they're running in Scotland.
If they're here, why aren't we catching them?
We've only fished for 10 minutes.
That's true. Well, here we are at the end of the Crinan Canal, and right across from us is the castle of Duntroon, which is the oldest inhabited castle in Scotland. And what a setting, in a sort of glade of trees with wonderful rounded, beautiful hills that look from this distance almost as though they're covered in a soft moss. And in this light, it looks spectacular.
Next morning at the Crinan Hotel, we talked to the owner about our ultimate destination.
When you're there, you'll understand just how incredible a place it is.
Well, of course, the things that interest me, particularly about St Kilda, are the magnificent stacks and cliffs, some of the highest in the British Isles, and the wonderful seabird colonies, which we should see at their peak.
There's not a day goes by I don't think of St Kilda. Not a day goes by that I don't think of St Kilda.
Was it horrible?
It was ghastly. Did you have a nice day?
Yeah. Nah, you're lying. You had a good time, didn't you?
But everyone you talk to about it, they say this is no joke.
Yeah.
Is it actually like a whirlpool?
Yes, it is.
Round, and it sucks you down.
Sucks base into it.
Would it do that?
Yeah, your engine will start cavitating as well.
And there's air, so you'll lose your buoyancy.
Buoyancy and you suck down.
When the wind blows and the tide runs strongly, a great whirlpool forms, the mighty Corrib Wrekin. In winter storms, its sinister groans keep the locals awake at night.
What causes it is it's about 150 metres deep, and there's a column rock that comes up to short of 29 metres of the surface, and the tidal flow flies through that sound, Corrib Wrekin sound there, hits this pillar of rock and creates a turbulence around it.
I can show you that we're not turning the engine, so there's absolutely no power whatsoever, and this is just the natural speed.
So I wouldn't even go to the edge of it with a rib. You keep a nice distance away.
The currents are not only moving left to right and right to left, but it's also up and down as well. So divers around here can literally be dragged right to the bottom of the sea in a matter of seconds.
It would kill you if you got stuck in it.
Wow! And this is considered probably one of the most, if not the most dangerous piece of water in the UK.
We're dead on springs.
There's something interesting forming over there. Yeah, there's a bubble, like woo, from time to time it forms.
I can imagine a strong nor'westerlies, big swell coming off the Atlantic against the flood tide. It'd just be hell.
Well, we didn't see a whirlpool.
We saw lots of little whirlpools.
We saw little tiny whirlpools, but not the sort of big, mega blockbuster that I've been promised. I feel defrauded. I was promised 3-foot standing waves, and I got 3-inch standing waves. It's still a magnificent sight.
So, my God, where did you get these things from?
Well, about 10 minutes ago, I spotted a fishing boat over there by the rocks.
Yeah.
And the fishermen were very kind.
What did it cost you, these?
£60 for the whole lot. Now we've got enough landing slings for the whole trip, really.
Honestly,
did you look?
Such a win.
They nearly went through my bloody finger.
Oh, you should be hospitalised. Oh, yeah.
That's what I call seafood.
Is this the killer longestine that got Ren?
Longestine that pinched.
Well, that is fantastic. Thank you, Ren. Thank you, Ren.
A couple of hours to get down to the sound of Islay. We'll cruise right up the sound here, and then we're heading in to the anchorage in Loch Tarbert. It's one of the most remotest lochs in the Inner Hebrides.
Well, that's a raised beach, and Jura's famous for. And they came about during the latter part of the Ice Age, when the ice was melting and retreating, and the land bounced back, having had this huge weight of ice on it. At various points it stopped long enough for a beach to form, rather like sitting on a cushion and seeing it rise again after you've removed your weight, but extended over thousands of years. And when you look at the mottling of lichen on the rocks, and then you look at a gulls egg, you will see why gulls eggs are camouflaged in the way they are.
Exactly.
What sort of marks the beginning of spring for you?
First lamb.
The first lamb, that's
lamb.
Spring. Beginning of April, first lambs.
First lamb.
Yeah.
That's spring for me.
From Jura, we headed north to Oban, the capital of the Western Isles. After a night in Oban, we took the Rib to Lismore Island to visit a ruined castle that brought back romantic memories for both of us.
No, I've got my grip. That's fine. It's okay. Landed on Lismore Island, a place called Castle Coffin. And this is where Derek and I came some 15 years ago on an intensely romantic weekend in September. And we discovered this castle, sited amongst fields, next to the loch, completely deserted and ruined. And we clambered into it, and we looked into the still loch.
The world is a living organism. She is designed to heal, but in a way, what we're debating now is, have we gone into overload?
The reality is we don't know what effect we've had on the Earth. We don't know what the effect of the saturation point of CO2 in the ocean is going to happen, because we don't even know when that is going to happen.
But the big problem I think that's facing the world is that it will be the shortage of raw materials, because we are using ever more trace metals that are in short supply.
We left Oban, passing through the Sound of Mull, to anchor off the town of Tobermory. Its multicoloured house facades often feature in local postcards.
From Tobermory, we're going to make a detour south to visit one of Scotland's iconic landmarks, immortalised by Mendelssohn in his Hebridean Overture. For me, it's one of the most keenly anticipated moments of the trip. Well, this is the Isle of Staffa, famous for Fingal's Caves, and you can see this wonderful columnar basalt formation. And it inspired Mendelssohn to write the Hebridean Overture, and in particular, Fingal's Cave.
We were alone in our small boat, at one with nature at her finest in the middle of the wide open sea.
We're looking at a pod of common dolphin, and they love riding bow waves, and here they are, playing like children. This is Loch Nevis, to our right over there. Those wonderful green-covered hills of the Knoydart Peninsula, reckoned to be the largest area of wilderness in the British Isles. It is inaccessible by road. This whole area here is really like an island, so it is the most wonderful area of wilderness.
It seems our first mate Dimmy, being Bulgarian, had confused Loch Nevis with Loch Ness.
When we're gonna see the Nessie creature?
Yes. What have you heard about the Nessie creature?
She's a very friendly vegetarian.
And how's the catches these days?
The prices are alright, but the fuel again, you know, it's...
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, you've got to catch more, and you're not having enough fuel and think about it, you know.
Yeah. Well, the boats cost a lot as well, huh?
Hell of a lot.
There's been a decline of 30% in the fishing fleet here.
Right, and what's that due to?
Just due to quotas, price of fuel, 65 pence a litre here at the present moment. It will go to 70 before the end of June. That's 100% certain.
Yeah.
And when you're burning 1,000 litres a day, 2,000 litres a day, it's a lot of money. It's not viable in some cases to carry on with it anymore.
Yeah. Have you ever been to St Kilda?
Many's a time. In the summertime, just a jewel in the middle of the sea.
Bang forever.
Now I tell you what this picture's going to look like. It's going to look like Jeremy always carries everything, and it's a complete lie because he never carries everything. He's just doing it for the camera.
On arrival, as it was such a perfect spring day, we decided to hike inland.
A cuckoo calls out its welcome, reminding us that summer is almost upon us. And not long into the walk, we spot a rare golden eagle soaring over the hills in the distance. The broom is now in full flower, having taken over from the fragrant gorse, both a vibrant yellow. The island of Rum was bought by Mr. and Mrs. Bullock in the mid-19th century, I think about 1850, and he was a very successful Lancastrian industrialist. And it was their son who, as is often the case, was hugely profligate and never did very much. And he, in Edwardian times, built this amazing mansion that you see to entertain his friends in right royal style for about 6 weeks of the year. And it's a mansion that is the state of the art for Edwardian England.
On our round-trip tour of the island, we came close inshore to the black basalt cliffs, stained a painterly yellow by lichen and white by bird guano.
We're looking at a shag on his nest, and you can notice a bit of yellow around the bill, bright yellow, and also the iridescent oily green of the plumage when you see it close to. And if the light's on it, it reflects just like oil does on the surface of water. Then we see a fulmer's nest, perfectly framed by rose root in flower. Well, these are interesting because these are common seals, which despite their name are not actually that common. They're only really found in the Farne Islands and here in the northwest of Scotland. Although I'm told by the locals that a lot of these seals are called mixie-moxies because they're in fact a hybrid between the common seal and the more common Atlantic grey seal. And the difference, if you look at the face, is that the grey seal has a head very much like a dog, particularly in the water. The common seal has a rounded, flattened face with a less prominent snout and much more prominent round eyes. They're beautiful creatures.
At our next island, Canna, Rob took us around the headland and dropped us off at the beach so that we could walk back through the sea of waving cotton grass.
Keeping the church steeple as our leading mark, we hike back to the boat across the fields. We're here at Lake Corroisk on Skye, and Lake Corroisk is probably one of the most photographed and drawn scenes in the whole of the Western Highlands. Absolutely typical glacial valley. Up on the right-hand side at the top there, you can see a dish shape. That is a corrie, or coombe as they say in Wales, and that's where the glaciers formed. The weight of ice in that bowl would push, like toothpaste out of a tube, the ice over the lip. You'll see there a big boulder has been deposited. Well, that's very typical of glacial action, and very often those boulders are of a rock that's entirely different to the bedrock on which it sits. And when that happens, they're known as outliers. And you can find outliers in the Pennines, for example, that have come from hundreds of miles away, that have been taken by glaciers, and when the ice melted, simply dropped. This little chap here is a sundew, Britain's only carnivorous plant.
We spent the night in a calm bay in the lee of Soay. After dinner, a piper serenaded us with a Skye boat song from a sailing boat that lay at anchor across the bay.
Okay, let's go look at this lobster pot.
Yet another useless lobster.
Oh, come on, Debbie, you're such a bloody pessimist.
I'll be damned.
You didn't say we caught something. How fantastic.
Look at his eyes are going over the wrong. But you be careful, because if that boy snap you.
We got one prawn. Lobsters! Yeah. I take it all back.
Very impressive.
I take it all back. Two just for again for the guests only.
There you go, there's a lovely little starter for you guys. Sorry,
Thank you very much. That looks fantastic. That looks amazing.
Pineapple to you. Really good.
As we made our way to the Sound of Sleat, our ever-cautious Captain Tim was sounding pessimistic about our chances of making it out to St Kilda in the near future.
It's fine in moderate conditions, but if we were to hit any bad conditions...
The long-range forecast in the paper was fantastic. It was very sunny and good weather, and particularly in the north.
You can't equate a beautiful heat wave of a June month to wind conditions.
Of course you can't. But the thing is, I mean, we must look on this like, climbers who climb Everest, we have a target and a goal.
Well, that's exactly it, and that. But I mean, obviously, we're going to try our damnedest to get there, but obviously, done the safest possible way.
From the Kyle of Loch Alsh, we ran back down the Sound of Sleat to meet Alex and Lizzie Catto, friends who live nearby. Alex, like Jeremy, a Cambridge archaeologist, took us to two mysterious stone brooks.
There are about 500 brochs in the north of Scotland. They were built for defensive purposes. They tend to be robbed of their stone because, obviously the stone is very useful for building. But here, because we're so isolated, we've got two next door to each other.
I'm particularly impressed with the fact that it's dry stone wall construction, and yet the facings, they look almost cut, and they preserve this rather lovely wasp shape.
Yes, it's like a kiln.
I mean, it's a perfect place to have the broch because you've got these fields here which are protected, ringed by hills all round. And then you're in a hidden valley where, unless someone knew you were here, they could bypass you without even knowing this valley existed.
At Loch Alsh, sadly we had to say goodbye to the Rib Soho Gyms and our good friend Rob. Both are returning south. We took a break from the sea to drive across Skye to the curious rocky landscapes of the Quarang, meeting shepherds and pipers along the way.
The pinnacles of jagged rock form impressive sculptural objects in a perfect landscape setting.
What do you got the sheep pens here for? What are you trying to achieve?
Just marking the lambs.
You're marking them?
Yes.
I find myself in love again with Scotland and its islands. It's the emptiness and the drama of the coastal seascapes that fill my soul with peace and wonder.
We slipped anchor and headed still further north under the controversial and beautiful bridge which links Skye to the mainland with its single massive span.
If we want to go to the garden and go round it,
I don't think we'll have
close
time
at
today because we'll close at 4 o'clock.
Well, that's my point. Try and make 2 full days.
I heard what you say, you don't have to repeat it. I know exactly what you said.
And if we do that,
the Scottish National Trust Garden at Inverewe is, like Tresca in the Isles of Scilly, noted for its tender plants. Both gardens benefit from their sheltered positions and a mild climate warmed by the Gulf Stream.
So what's going on here then?
I don't know, they just love this terrain, this earth. Maybe it's peaty, maybe it's similar to...
I mean, it's clearly...
I'll never forget that bright blue Himalayan poppy.
Is this what you would expect to find in your area of Scotland in this garden in June?
Yes, but then also the late spring flowers like cistruses are coming out, which is incredible.
What does this tell you about the lateness or earliness of spring?
I think it's early this year because we are right up in the northwest of Scotland and yet we are growing very tender Mediterranean plants.
Because that is like a tongue. Quite extraordinary.
I think they're the best gardens I've ever seen anywhere.
So we are going up from Loch Ewe to Ullapool, where you are, Rosanna, and you're just in there somewhere, aren't you? Just opposite that island.
Yes, we're right opposite that island.
Do you have red deer on your land?
Yes, a lot.
Rosanna and her gilly walked the moors with us to look for red deer.
So what you're doing really is that you're keeping the herd strong. You are culling the weakest. I personally wouldn't do it unless there was a reason behind it. I am incapable of just going out and shooting a beautiful stag. They lock antlers with their heads down. You see them fighting. This is lethal. This is like a sword.
Yeah.
So they damage the other body of the other stag, and then they get gangrene, and then they die. So when you're out stalking in the season, this is something that you really want to get off the hill.
By now the rain had come, and our 6 weeks of unbroken, perfect spring weather had drawn to a close.
Well, that's the first run of salmon this year. Must be tasting the rain.
Fantastic. Tasting the rain. I love that. That's a great expression.
We had heard about the Danish ceramicist Lottie Glob, who lives in Caithness on the northernmost tip of Scotland. She bought a crofter's small holding 40 years ago and lives alone in splendid isolation. We drove north to meet her and to see her work.
Well, I've been up here for 40 years. There was nothing here when I came. Hardly a tree, hardly a flower. I spend a lot of time in the hills, just camping and sleeping and bringing material back and using it in clay. It's sort of a give and take all the time. Well, I have got a huge respect for the earth. When I'm out there, I'm one with the land. For me, it keeps me sane walking out there.
You couldn't do this if you lived in a city, or you wouldn't?
I don't know what I would do. I hate cities.
We drove on from Lottie's to Durness, the most northerly place on the west coast of Scotland. We stood to contemplate the view and reflect on our achievements to date. We still had the Outer Hebrides and our final goal of St Kilda to conquer. Once back on Killarney, we weighed anchor and headed north for Loch Inver. This was to be the most northerly point that Killarney reached on the trip. A great moment for Captain Tim.
"58 degrees 07 minutes north." Well, that's our furthest point.
That's the furthest point north, Loch Inver. So this is the famous Minch.
Yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to come out of here, come south, Priest Island, and then we'll come across, then we'll cut down.
Well, I'd like to go past the Shiants if possible.
Yeah, we will go past them, but obviously
can't go too close,
not majorly close. But it's because the bottom here in the Minch is so uneven. That's why it gets so rough, even in the not bad conditions. It's going to be rough. They're forever giving you warnings about this sea area. It gets very rough, but we'll have a look and see what we think.
So we better batten down the boat.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, we've definitely got to stow everything.
Yeah.
There's a rough sea, there's a very rough sea, and then there was this other thing called high.
High, and then phenomenal.
And what was high? If we went across the Minch in high, what would we experience?
Yeah.
Would be sunk.
Yeah, not good.
Good girl, she came the right way up. Good.
So what can we see? Big bloody great sea. Just crossed the Minch. The crossing was only a little lumpy. Arrived in Harris, South Harris, in the Bay of Tarbet, where we've anchored for the night.
beautiful calm sea. And here we've just stepped ashore to find this fantastic colony of herring gulls with their chicks. There's a little tooth on the end, and that's an egg tooth, and that enables it to break out of the shell of the egg. What's extraordinary is it's actually going from one land to the other. It's going exactly across the harbour. Very windy Callanish, the Neolithic stone circles on the Isle of Lewis, which are probably after Stonehenge one of the most important collections of standing stones monuments, rivaling those of Karnak in Brittany. We see here we have avenues as well as stone circles, and outlying stone circles, all within a sort of 5-mile radius. Obviously a very holy and important site.
At North Uist, we climbed North Lee to be greeted by distant views of land broken by hundreds of small lakes or lochans. The laird had told us that he has 500,000 acres, but that half of it is water. Near the top of the hill, we found metal strewn all around. A simple memorial stone recorded the crash of a wartime American Liberator bomber. When we climbed to the top of the hill, there was this sort of cairn of stones. I don't know why people, put stones on top of stones, but they do it on top of hillsides all over the world. We thought we'd do a little dedication to health of the planet and to the health of all the people who live on the planet.
And gents.
Demi, what a start. Did you catch these all yourself?
Are these the prawns
no.
that came off the boat yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
And they are langostini.
They're langostini.
Yeah.
They're langostini. They're not.
They're beautiful.
Vatersay, spring is in full bloom. There are stands of yellow ladies' bedstraw, the pink umbrals of the wild carrot, as well as Scottish thistles in bud. Mad sort of person did I marry? Look at him running naked along the beach, and it's freezing. Go into the sea!
Here, on the island of Barra, it seemed calm in the shelter of Castle Bay, while out at sea there was a huge storm blowing and the water was very rough. Castle Bay was home to a substantial fishing fleet until the 1970s, by which time the herring had been fished out. Now not a single fishing boat remains.
We said goodbye to our last guests. Now we're just waiting for that weather gap, which we pray will come in the next few days so we can complete our mission.
I think it's great to be here. Given where we are in the world, you know, it's not the tropics. We're having lovely sunny days.
And I'm very touched by the extraordinary magic of the place. And I want to experience that.
Well, we haven't not got that.
I know, but it's looking increasingly difficult and unlikely. Unless there is a high pressure that gives us a clear weather window, we're probably not going to get out there. And we've got 10 days in which to do it.
Southwest 5 to 7, moderate, becoming rough in Hebrides rain. The extended 24-hour outlook is for strong winds in all areas.
That basically means there's absolutely no way we can go to St Kilda in the next 48 hours.
No, I'd say not.
The weather was getting worse. We were beginning to doubt if we would ever complete our mission. St Kilda is 7 or more hours sailing time out into the Atlantic, a long way from shelter in a storm.
God, it's still blowing a gale, isn't it?
It certainly is.
What's the wind speed?
Well, this is actually telling a bit of a few lies because it's picking up turbulence from the mast, so it's right. Not telling you what the true wind speed is. But I've had 50 knot gusts.
What's force 9?
Force 9 is 48 knots. And 48 knots is the top end of a force 9. So we've had gusts of storm 10.
Sea state, flight or moderate. The weather, fair. Rain later. And the visibility, good.
I think we should have a look around this corner, see what it's like out into the Atlantic. If it looks alright, I think we should go.
That means it's alright.
Yeah, let's go.
That's an okay forecast.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I know, that's fine. I'm happy with that.
At last, a short weather window, and ever-wise Tim decides it's safe to make a run out and back before the weather closes in again. And finally, there they were, the distant twin shapes of Herta and Borroway, the two main islands of the St Kilda group. We have read so much about St Kilda, a group of 3 islands and 2 tall sea stacks. Its very isolation and history afford it World Heritage status. The strange, inbred inhabitants were evacuated in 1930, the last hunter-gatherers in the British Isles.
This is an achievement to get out in these seas to this tiny little island. It's one of the greatest gallantries in the world, and it's one of the greatest places for cliff nesting seabirds you'll ever see anywhere in the world. It's got the most spectacular cliffs in the world, and to see it and to experience it will be something that will stay with you for the rest of your lives.
Before landing on the island, we launched our little tender and embarked on a foolhardy but thrilling 5-mile crossing of open ocean to the stacks where the seabirds nest.
The great skiers are attacking the gannets to try and get them to release their food. It's like a halo, a permanent halo of birds we've got going around us. Full schooners have just attacked us and spat that fetid oil at us. I'm trying to get my hood up. Landing on St Kilda is for me the culmination of a long-held dream. The sight before me was more than I had imagined. The backdrop of the hills, behind an amphitheatre of green grass, the primitive dry stone structures built by the long-departed inhabitants. The beehive structures, thatched dry stone wall structures called cleat, or in Gaelic the plural is cleitian, and they were used by the St Kilda residents for storage, principally of the seabirds that they had killed and salted for winter food. What it must have been like for them, a life as hard as it's possible to imagine, cut off for weeks by storms, subsisting on a monotonous diet of potatoes and salted seabirds.
The islands have a second World Heritage designation for their unique wildlife. The feral Neolithic Soay sheep, the St Kilda mouse, and the St Kilda wren. All are indigenous to the islands.
The St Kildans were severe on themselves, cowed by a strict Calvinistic code of religious observance, and cut off culturally from the rest of mankind by a 1,000-year diaspora. The silence of the place and the strange ancient atmosphere feel like going back in time to the Stone Age.
Feel very pleased with what we have achieved, but we mustn't forget the real heroine, Killarney.
Being on St Kilda with its unspoilt natural beauty made me reflect on the damage we're doing to our planet. Throughout our 2-month voyage, we've glimpsed some disturbing changes to nature's enduring rhythm. Flowers blooming early, dwindling fish stocks, ivy choking trees, the loss of the English elm, and a bloom of jellyfish smothering 250,000 salmon.
Hopefully, sharing our experience will encourage more people to value this treasured heritage of nature and the sea.